Hi, I'm Jill Chivers from Shop Your Wardrobe and 16 Style Types.
And I'm Imogen Lamport from Inside Out Style and 16 Style Types too. Today I want to talk about when do you know you found the one? Not the man or the woman in this instant, but the garment, the accessory, the thing you've been shopping for. Because one thing that can happen is either you're looking and looking and looking and you just never settle on anything.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you settle too quickly and then maybe disappointed. Or just you kind of never quite, you kind of stopped too soon where you haven't looked quite far enough.
And the garment in some way is deficient. It never meets the need for which you purchased it for. It doesn't quite work with everything else in your wardrobe, and you're always unsatisfied with it to some degree or another. And both of these situations are really interesting. They are. And I am very familiar with over-acquiring in an effort to find the perfect outfit. And you're finding garments that sort of meet 8 out of 10 requirements. But then the next one meets 7 out of 10. And so I have had the experience of acquiring things that look like the same thing, look like duplicates of the same thing. And this is all in aid of finding the perfect garment. So there's something there about this idea that it exists. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is the process that we go through for matching up vision of a perfect garment with reality.
Yes.
And myself, I'm drawn towards closure and not wanting to have too much open possibility or ambiguity, which is how it can be translated into. And so I'll make a decision and close something off, but because if I'm out and about in a shopping environment, I might come across something in that same category. I can find the question is being reopened and reopened. And so I go through this sort of process of trying to find something. And of course, some people do the opposite. Their vision can never be met in reality, and so they never purchase something that they really need because they're looking and looking and looking.
Yes. So, of course, there is an aspect where sometimes body shape, colouring, and current fashion trends may mean that what you're after just isn't available.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that's when we suggest go and find a dressmaker.
Yeah, if it's an important enough item.
If it's an important enough item. Sometimes it's, and honestly, it can even be something like a pair of dress pants for work, where it's going to be something you're going to wear over and over again, and finding fit, particularly in trousers for women, is a tricky thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes for something even as simple as that, it could be, you can try on 50 pairs of pants and none will fit you terribly well, versus if you go to a dressmaker who makes it for your measurements, the fit option is much greater and you're going to enjoy it more. So sometimes it can be as simple as that, or just, if you're going to an event and you're looking for the dress, and just sometimes it's just the season is not your season.
Yeah.
So knowing that sometimes it's like, if I've gone to 10 stores and there's nothing like the idea I had that I was looking for, and I need to have it because I've got a time limit or because there's an event coming up, that's also when I'd say, make it, go to a dressmaker, something like that.
Yeah.
But then there is the whole aspect of when is the searching, the searching, when is that? How do you know when to stop?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the interesting things that we've seen on some of your groups is people who are commenting and saying things like, I'm not entirely satisfied with all of these things and I've settled too soon. And I think that's a really interesting one about, when we feel the need to do that and what that results in. And that doesn't happen so much to me in terms of settling too soon, but this acquiring to find an item that's going to be perfect. And part of it for me has been about letting go of the idea that the perfect item exists. That has every single criteria. I'm going to have to compromise on something.
Yes.
And maybe finding what your compromise point is can be really helpful. Is it going to be a little bit about contrast, for example, or is there something about fit? Fit can often be fixed with alterations. Colouring is maybe that it is it going to be about the fabric? So there can be those kinds of things, working out where am I prepared to compromise.
And I think this is where knowing your 3 to 5 guidelines, which we've talked about before.
Yes.
That if you know which your 3 to 5 that are the really super important that you won't compromise on, then you can know what other things that are still part of your whole style, but maybe aren't as important. And I think that's useful to know.
Yeah.
And that can be helpful. Also, particularly if you're looking at something that maybe, like Jill, you've got multiples of the same thing already, it's going, why am I, actually looking at, why am I looking at this? Is this because I want to find the first best and the one at home is the second best? Or, because that's also something that there's no point in having a whole lot of second bests or third bests in your wardrobe.
Yes. Although as somebody who's accumulated a lot of them, I can understand how that can happen. And, it can take a fairly courageous, if not ruthless, approach to say, which of these is not best for me.
Yes.
And I can let them go. For some of us, the letting go is much more difficult than the acquiring.
This is, there is research that shows that we put greater value on something once we own it,
right,
compared to before we own it.
Yeah.
So letting go can be actually tricky, and that because you put time and effort. And so this can be related back to the hunter-gatherer, which we've talked about before, where that you've put the time in and the effort in, and some money as well. But it's that time and effort that they are also an expense or a currency in some ways. That we want to bring something home, and so this is why too that sometimes that's when you can settle too soon, too easily.
Yes.
But then, of course, with online shopping, there's a very easy thing of just like, I'm going to search forever. Like, I'm going to search the entire internet of 1 million, billion, trillion pages.
Absolutely.
Until I find that thing. And is that also a good use of your time?
Exactly. I can really relate to this. I've been on a shopping expedition. I feel that for it to be worthwhile, I need to have something physical, as opposed to just the experience was interesting, because I quite like the looking part of things, and because of my own history with over shopping, I'm very much aware of when I feel that need to acquire something, and the way I get around it is I lower the dollar value and I make it something disposable. So it might be say a nice moisturizer, or it might be a small scarf in an op shop, or something along those lines. It's something that I can either easily use or easily dispose of, and it actually has a very similar emotional payoff to purchasing something of a higher dollar value that's a more substantial item, say like a pair of shoes or a jacket or something like that can feel harder to let go of, even if I bought it in an op shop at a low dollar value. So that's a technique that I've used that I find extremely helpful, that I recognise the hunter-gatherer thing is at play, and rather than wrestle with it, which of course you could, and maybe psychologists would recommend that you could, I recognise that the more expedient thing can be to recognise this is at play, and that it will soothe this sort of, I experience them as sort of ruffled feelings, but in a way that I'm not going to have a lot of buyer's remorse after. And that's incredibly important for me with my history of over shopping, but it might be useful for other people who experience some form of agitation. I've been out there shopping. You might not be able to get the perfect thing, but you can still assuage a little bit of unsettled emotions, but with something that's you're not going to have any regret about.
Yes. So how about when we're thinking about how long do I go on for?
Yeah.
So if you are the opposite way around, where you tend to never settle.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, I've mentioned this, there's a blog post about it, a brown jacket that I bought. Now, I knew I needed a jacket. I didn't know what colour it was, but I knew I needed to be able to dress it up, dress it down. It needed to be a bit unusual. It couldn't just be a classic suit jacket. It needed to fit me, it needed to work for me, it needed to be my style recipe, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I had that on my shopping list for about 2 years. It took me about 2 years to find. Now, part of the reason was this was before I had my breast reduction.
Yeah.
So I found fitting jackets very tricky anyway.
Yeah.
So I might have seen things that I liked the idea of, but they just didn't fit. And I wasn't prepared to settle for something that I couldn't get over my boots.
And this was a real personality piece. This wasn't a supporting act. It was a hero that you were going for.
Yeah. And I wanted to have some multifunction, like a real kind of versatile piece.
Yeah.
And so when I finally came across it, which it was about to, and so every shop I went into, in that kind of, I went, well, I'm looking for a jacket. Yeah. And that was something that I was keeping my eyes out, but just never settled. Yeah. But after about 2 years, I came across it one day. And it was like it ticked all my boxes. It was my 3 to 5 things. It fit me. It had the personality. It was all those things. And even though it was more expensive than I had kind of previously expected to purchase something from. Yeah. Because I knew it ticked all my boxes, it was a very easy decision. The minute I hit it, I went, that's it. I found the one.
Yeah, yeah.
But, I mean, I certainly wasn't trawling the internet all night, every night, trying to find it, and I wasn't going out on a million shopping trips. It was just on my list, which I think is Sometimes a little bit different from that kind of that real searching.
Yes. And sometimes that searching, there is a deadline for it. I'm going to a conference, there's a special event, it's a wedding or whatever it is. I have a deadline that I have to purchase something for, which to me speaks to, if you see something that you really love that has made it an 8, it's an 8 or more, and it fits your key criteria, whether that's colour or fit or fabric or silhouette or whatever it is, I'm very much in favour of seriously considering purchasing it, because the occasion will arise. But if the reverse happens and the occasion is there but the outfit isn't, you can expend an inordinate amount of time and energy trying to find something. That, of course, it needs to be balanced with whatever your shopping habits are, and you need to make wise decisions for yourself.
And very often too, sometimes is we might already have something. There's often an assumption that, particularly for an event or a wedding or that we have to have something new, and it's like, how often are you actually looking in your wardrobe and going, have I got something that's totally appropriate already?
Or can be repurposed relatively easily. And the thing is about a lot of those special events, no one's really looking at you unless you're the bride or the guest of honour. And so you can actually get away with an awful lot, I think. If it isn't in your budget to purchase something particular for that, it's amazing what you can put together out of your own wardrobe.
So, there's no complete answer here.
No.
There's we can't give you, but it's that, be aware that if you tend to go, I settle too soon, maybe put that into your your mind as you are shopping, to go, am I settling too soon because I want to close off?
Yes.
Or if you tend to be someone who searches and never settles, that am I expecting perfection and perfection doesn't exist?
One of the most useful mantras I have is, just because it's leopard print doesn't mean I need to buy it, because that's my thing. I can often have an automatic, if it's leopard print, it goes straight into the yes basket, and then I have to argue for a no.
Yes.
And so I've tried to change that to say it is always on probation in the store. It is always a question mark until it goes through. And it's still a conscious process that I go through, because that's such an automatic yes for me. I have to put these constructs around it. Otherwise, I can end up acquiring a whole stack of stuff that shortly thereafter is weeded out of the wardrobe because I didn't do it pre-purchase. The process still has to happen. I'm just doing it post-purchase. So that, you might find that having some of those guidelines is also useful, depending on what your thing is, and we all have a different thing.
Yes. So we'd love to know what your experiences are about whether you tend to buy too early or take too long to make a decision.
Absolutely. And if you know your style type, we'd be interested if you have any insights about your style type and this issue as well, because there could very well be a relationship for you.